In the heart of the American Midwest, where endless fields of corn and soybeans stretch to the horizon, John Deere has long been more than just a brand. It's a part of the collective memory, the roar of engines at daybreak, the iconic green and yellow etched into the minds of farming families for generations. But on an early autumn morning, that familiar hum was suddenly replaced by urgent chants, blaring horns, and banners flapping in the wind. Over 10,000 John Deere workers walked off the assembly lines, leaving behind the factory floors that had shaped their lives. The strike wasn't just about wages or benefits. It was about the feeling that they were being pushed to the margins of the very home they helped build. At the same time, from Washington came a thunderous political blow. President Donald Trump announced a 200% tariff on imported parts, citing the need to protect domestic manufacturing and restore America's industrial might. For many Midwesterners, it was a promise of fairness. But for John Deere's leadership, it was a direct hit to a supply chain that relied partly on foreign components. Within weeks, internal reports painted a grim picture: soaring costs, production slowdowns, and looming order cancellations. Then came the shockwave that rocked the entire region. John Deere would shift part of its production to Mexico. In roadside diners and small-town cafes, the talk was nonstop. To many, it felt like a blatant betrayal. How could an American icon abandon the very soil that had nurtured it for over a century? But up in the executive offices, the narrative was different. Leadership called it the only way to survive under rising costs and global competition. Two slices of reality, two clashing perspectives, and one lingering question: can an American icon still be American if it must leave home just to stay alive? To truly grasp the pain and anger, we have to go back to the early days of John Deere, when it all began with a gleaming steel plow under the 1837 sun. From that point on, every bolt, every sheet of steel wove together not just a story of machines, but a story of people and the identity of a community. In the heart of the American Midwest, where endless fields of corn and soybeans roll across the landscape, John Deere has long been more than just a brand. It's part of the collective memory. The roar of engines breaking the early morning stillness, the green and yellow colors etched into the minds of farming families across generations. But one early autumn morning, that familiar sound gave way to urgent chants, blaring horns, and banners fluttering in the wind. More than 10,000 John Deere workers walked off the assembly lines, leaving behind the factory floors they had spent their lives on. This strike didn't erupt solely over paychecks or benefits. It was fueled by a deeper feeling, the sense that they were being pushed to the margins of the very home they had helped build. At the same time, a thunderous political decision came down from Washington like a gavel slam. President Donald Trump announced a 200% tariff on imported parts, claiming it was to protect American manufacturing and restore the country's industrial standing. For many in the Midwest, it was a promise of fairness. But for John Deere's leadership, it was a punch to the gut of a supply chain partially reliant on foreign components. Within just a few weeks, internal reports painted a bleak picture: soaring costs, production delays, and looming cancellations of orders. Then came the news that shook the region. John Deere would move part of its production to Mexico. In roadside diners and small-town cafes, the chatter was nonstop. To many, it felt like outright betrayal. How could an American icon abandon the very land that had sustained it for over a century? But up on the upper floors of company headquarters, the story sounded different. Executives called it the only viable choice in the face of rising costs and global competition. Two slices of reality, two opposing perspectives, and one lingering question: can an American icon still be American if it must leave home just to survive? To truly understand the pain and anger, we have to go back all the way to John Deere's beginnings, when it all started with a gleaming steel plow catching the sunlight in 1837. From that moment on, every bolt, every sheet of steel became part of a story, not just about machines, but about people and the identity of an entire community. The storm began with winds that seemed distant at first. It started with scattered reports of global steel prices surging after several countries imposed export restrictions. Then came news of electronics component factories in Asia being forced to shut down temporarily due to the pandemic. Each seemingly minor event, when pieced together, formed a wave that came crashing into America. For John Deere, where each tractor is the culmination of thousands of parts from around the world, every broken link in the chain sent tremors through the entire production line. The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic still lingered, and just as the global supply chain was struggling to recover, a trade war erupted between major economies. A flood of new tariffs rose like walls, blocking the flow of goods and steel. The metal that feeds the entire agricultural industry became a strategic commodity. Shipping costs tripled, even quadrupled, compared to normal times. Containers filled with vital components could sit idle at ports for weeks, stuck due to labor shortages or a lack of connecting vessels. In that context, President Donald Trump's decision to impose a 200% tariff on imported parts struck like a bolt from the blue. Though the stated goal was to protect domestic manufacturing, for John Deere, already feeling cost pressures from every direction, it was like a boulder added to an already heavy load. Leadership was forced to confront two invisible clocks, always ticking side by side: the investor's clock, demanding short-term returns, and the generational clock of the community, which called for long-term stability and loyalty. Every move had to balance stock prices against the livelihoods of tens of thousands of people. The pressure from financial markets only turned the screws tighter. Major shareholders demanded the company maintain profit margins, even as costs soared. Competitors from Europe, Japan, and even China were pushing into the North American market with more competitive pricing, thanks to fewer tariffs or cheaper access to raw materials. Every lost contract, every customer who turned to a rival brand, was a warning that John Deere's historical advantage might disappear faster than anyone imagined. But the challenges didn't just come from the outside. Internal tensions also mounted. The manufacturing division urged the company to keep plants in the U.S., emphasizing quality and brand reputation. Meanwhile, the finance team ran the numbers and warned that without cutting costs, mounting losses would soon swallow the budget for research and development. One tense meeting followed another, each figure on the spreadsheet carrying consequences for an entire community. On the strategy room table, plans were drawn, debated, and scrapped. Shift production to Asia? Too far and politically risky. Keep everything in the US? The costs were unsustainable. Cut production? That would cede market share to competitors. Then, one name started rising to the surface as a middle ground solution: Mexico. Just south of the border, a manufacturing ecosystem stood ready. Skilled labor, steel and component supply chains untouched by the 200% tariff, and perhaps most importantly, only a few days away from the US market. And so John Deere's story turned a page, a high-stakes decision that could mean survival in the midst of a global storm, or the first step in a long farewell to the homeland that built it. Mexico wasn't a choice made in desperation. It was the result of months of careful calculation, weighing every number and every risk. On the map, the distance from Mexico's northern industrial cities to the cornfields of the American Midwest is just a few days by truck or train. That means tractors or harvesters assembled in Monterrey or Saltillo can show up in Iowa or Illinois without having to cross oceans, like they would from Asia. This proximity not only cuts down on shipping costs, but also allows the company to respond more quickly to seasonal demand, a matter of survival in the agricultural industry. Mexico also offers another major advantage: access to raw materials and components without the crushing 200% tariff currently levied on imported products in the U.S. Steel plants in Mexico, along with an electronic supply network built by Asian partners already operating there, create a steady and more affordable flow of materials. For a company being squeezed by steel prices and rising production costs, avoiding such a massive tax burden could mean saving entire contracts and keeping prices within reach for farmers. Labor, too, plays a decisive role. In Mexico, the workforce in mechanical engineering, agricultural machinery, and automotive manufacturing has decades of experience. They're well-trained and ready to meet the strict standards John Deere demands. Lower labor costs don't just ease financial pressure, they allow the company to maintain high output without cutting back. On top of that, the legal framework provided by the USMCA trade agreement ensures smooth flows of commerce and investment, giving new projects a secure legal corridor to move through. Above all, Mexico is seen as a strategic satellite, not a full replacement for U.S. plants, but a way to share the burden and protect the company's global competitiveness. In the eyes of leadership, it's a defensive move necessary for survival in a world where disruptions can hit at any time, from raw material prices and tariff policies to geopolitical tensions. Still, with each assembly line that shifts south, a quiet question echoes in the hearts of Midwesterners. If part of the heart has left, can what's left behind keep beating the same way? And that very question leads us into the next chapter of the story, where profit margins collide with fears of job loss, and boardroom decisions ripple out into every street corner, every coffee shop, and every football field in the small American towns that have stood with John Deere for more than a century. When news broke that John Deere would shift part of its production to Mexico, the quiet towns of the Midwest felt as if someone had pulled out a foundational beam. In places like Waterloo, Davenport, and Moline, towns that once proudly called themselves the home of John Deere, the mood turned heavy. On small-town streets, machine repair shops, family diners, corner grocery stores, all understood that any assembly line shut down would mean empty chairs in dining rooms and revenue no longer flowing into the town's communal lifeblood. Every tractor rolling off a line somewhere else meant one less technician, one lost family income, and one more piece of the community falling out of place. The immediate consequence was jobs. Suspended or scaled-back production lines left hundreds, even thousands, facing unemployment or forced to accept lower-paying roles. Local suppliers, from small fabrication shops to parts manufacturers, began losing orders, leading to layoffs. The impact extended far beyond the factory gates, rippling through the entire local economy. A once crowded breakfast diner now sat half empty. The town bank saw more people requesting loan extensions. High school sports teams lost longtime sponsors. The indirect effects were even harder to measure. As trust between workers and leadership eroded, the atmosphere on the shop floor changed. Those who remained on the line felt a quiet fear. Am I next? That anxiety crept into every shift, chipping away at productivity, team morale, and ultimately the quality of the products, once the crown jewel of a century-old legacy. In an industry where uptime psychology, the mindset of keeping machines running 24/7, is the gold standard, even a small delay in service is enough to push a customer toward a competitor. Farmers, the loyal backbone of John Deere's customer base, felt the shift too. They worried that a more scattered service network would mean longer repair wait times. The long-simmering right-to-repair debate suddenly roared back to life. Many farmers complained that they wanted to diagnose and fix their own machines, but John Deere's software forced them to go through authorized centers, a slow, costly process. As confidence in service declined, so did brand loyalty, opening up space for competitors ready to step in. But charts and spreadsheets can't capture the weight of this change. It's the silent stare of a father when his son if he'll still be working at the plant next year. It's the sigh of a mother recalculating the college fund. It's the stadium lights that don't come on this fall because there's no budget to keep them running. Every boardroom decision, once it hits the ground, becomes a very real, very human story, and sometimes a painful one. From a macroeconomic perspective, this loss affects more than just individual towns. When factories close or shrink, America loses a piece of its domestic industrial muscle. Relying on manufacturing beyond its borders means giving up control in times of crisis. When supply chains break, the ability to respond quickly to domestic needs weakens. Over time, this could erode the competitive edge of American industry, not just in agriculture, but also in tech sectors that depend on the same manufacturing backbone. And this is where the story stops being just a company's internal affair. It becomes part of a larger chessboard, one where rivals, public policy, and national trade strategy collide. When a brand like John Deere starts to shake, it's not just local communities that feel the tremors, but the entire competitive framework of an industry and even the rules that guide the national economy come under stress. To truly grasp the full picture, we must now turn to a new chapter, one where corporate moves and policymaker decisions intertwine to determine who will shape the game and who will be left watching from the sidelines. As John Deere faced turbulence, the gaps in the market instantly became ripe targets for rivals who had long been waiting in the wings. From nimble domestic manufacturers to powerful global corporations, all saw an opportunity. They understood that customer loyalty, carefully cultivated by John Deere over generations, was beginning to waver. And sometimes all it takes is one misstep, a late delivery, a broken machine left unrepaired, to open the door for someone else to step in. Competitive strategies rolled out in quick succession. Some companies slashed prices dramatically, offsetting the cut with flexible financing options to entice farmers. Others poured resources into after-sales service, promising repairs within 24 hours, something John Deere had once proudly claimed as its own signature strength. Still others leaned into the Made in America message, striking a chord with customers disillusioned by the sight of an iconic brand shifting away from home. Every move was calculated not only to capture market share, but to strike at the very foundation of customer trust. Meanwhile, the role of public policy became increasingly pivotal. Tariffs were designed to protect domestic production, but without careful foresight, they can backfire. For John Deere, the 200% tariff forced the company to seek workarounds instead of incentivizing more US-based manufacturing. This raises a difficult question. Is trade policy shooting itself in the foot by creating instability for both businesses and the communities that depend on them? The government holds other tools as well: production incentives, subsidy conditions, and programs to support local workforce training. But if these measures are only designed for the short term, with no accounting for global shifts, they won't create the kind of stability industries need. In contrast, effective policy must meet three criteria: stability, so companies can plan for the long haul; transparency, so all players understand the rules of the game; and alignment between business and community interests, so that every production line isn't just a financial decision, but a social commitment. In reality, the chessboard now involves far more than just John Deere and its competitors. Federal and state governments, farmer associations, international investors, and everyday consumers all have stakes in the outcome. Each party carries its own interests, pressures, and limitations, and every decision can trigger a chain reaction. A new tax policy might save a factory, but raise product prices. A government subsidy might keep a business rooted locally, but if it doesn't drive innovation, it merely prolongs stagnation. Amid these overlapping calculations, the future of John Deere and of the communities that raised it no longer lies on a single road. Instead, multiple paths branch out, each carrying both opportunity and risk. And to see more clearly where this could lead, we need to examine three potential scenarios: the most optimistic, the middle of the road, and the darkest outcome, the one no one wants to imagine, but everyone must be prepared to face. In the optimistic scenario, John Deere finds a balance between financial pressure and social responsibility. The company retains the majority of its production lines in the US while heavily investing in automation to cut costs without drastically reducing its workforce. Workers are retrained to operate more advanced machinery, leading to increased productivity and consistent product quality. Mexico becomes a supportive satellite focused on manufacturing less iconic components, helping ease cost pressures without diluting the brand's identity. In this future, community trust is restored, the towns continue to buzz with the sound of engines, and John Deere not only survives, but steps into a new era stronger than before. In the neutral scenario, Mexico gradually takes on a larger share of the production load, but John Deere still maintains key factories in the US to preserve its Made in USA image. Some towns lose their main plants and are forced to restructure their economies, pivoting toward other industries like renewable energy, defense manufacturing, or high tech. While the transition is painful, it also creates room for new sectors to grow. Workers no longer expect lifetime careers at a single company, but adapt to more fluid roles across various industries. The market and the communities gradually accept a hybrid John Deere, part American, part Mexican, as long as the machines stay reliable and the service stays on time. But there's also a darker scenario, one where short-term decisions and global volatility spiral beyond control. As US production costs become unsustainable, most of the manufacturing is offshored to Mexico or other countries. The towns that once thrived around the factories slip into decline. Unemployment rises, stores shut down, and school budgets run dry. Customer loyalty collapses amid service delays and soaring equipment prices. Competitors seize the moment to gain market share, not just in the US, but globally. John Deere, while still in operation, begins to lose its American soul, the very essence that powered its brand for nearly 2 centuries. In this version of the future, all that remains is a name, stripped of its connection to the land, the people, and the towns that once staked their hopes on it. No matter which path the future takes, they all begin with the choices made today. Preserving identity or trading it for survival, investing for the long term, or chasing short-term profit, these aren't just questions for John Deere, but for any company rooted in its community. Because at the end of the day, industrial identity isn't forged only from steel, or welded at the seams, or painted in green and yellow. It's shaped by people, by relationships, and by the enduring trust passed down through generations. If you followed the story this far, I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts. Do you believe John Deere can keep its heart rooted in American soil? Or do you think this shift is inevitable in a volatile, globalized world? Leave a comment below. Let's start a conversation. And if you'd like to continue exploring stories that dive deep into the intersection of economy, society, and humanity, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Because some stories aren't just meant to be heard, they're meant to make us think and act.